In 2002, an Indiana resident vanished. The car didn't. One small town went to sleep, and by morning a family's world had changed. No skid marks, no broken guardrail, no 911 call. Just a missing person and a silence that felt too heavy for a simple accident. A mother kept a porch light on for years. A sister saved every flyer in a shoebox. Friends drove the same road at night, hoping a headlight beam would hit something everyone missed. The town tried to move forward, but it moved differently. Doors locked earlier, kids texted when they got home, and every winter the date came back like a bruise. Police worked the usual angles. Volunteers lined the shoulders of old county roads. Divers checked water where they could. Nothing. The case hardened into a cold file and lived there, one folder among many. Time didn't solve it. Technology did. What 2002 couldn't show, modern tools could. Old tapes were cleaned and sharpened. Cell records were rebuilt into maps. Sonar scanned the water like a flashlight under a dark door. At first, results looked ordinary: logs, junk, the usual shadows. But then a shape appeared that didn't match the lake, and a detail in the old report, ignored for years, suddenly mattered. Stay with this story. By the end, you'll see how tech finally broke the silence, what was hidden in plain sight, and why the arrest shook a community that trusted the wrong person. Before we start, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. It helps people find these cases. And if you want complete, evidence-led stories without filler, subscribe now. We post calm, step-by-step narratives that respect victims and stick to facts. 3 questions will guide what you're about to see. Why was there no crash scene on the road if this was only an accident? How could a car vanish for decades without a single clear lead? Who was hiding in plain sight while the town kept searching? Let's go back to the last normal moments. A short drive, a routine gas stop, and a tiny note in the file that looked like nothing until the day it explained everything. Her name in the file is formal and cold. In real life, it wasn't. Friends called her Lena. She was 27 in 2002. Living in a small rental on the edge of a south-central Indiana town where the highway thins into 2 lanes and cornfields do most of the talking. By day she worked the early shift at a grocery distribution center, scanner on her hip, steel toe shoes, hair tied back. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. She liked steady. Steady paid the rent, kept gas in the car, and left a little for weekend coffee with her sister. Lena's habits were simple and clear. She kept quarters in the cup holder for tolls she never used. She saved receipts inside the visor, rubber banded by month. She wore the same light denim jacket in spring and fall, even when it didn't quite match. Her keychain had a tiny red flashlight that made a soft click when she checked the lock. She liked things she could see and hear, proof that the world was in order. Most mornings started the same. She woke before sunrise, fed Mittens, the stray cat who never moved in but never missed breakfast, and called her mom while the coffee dripped. On days when she had the later shift, she drove her sister to the daycare where her nephew spent the morning. "Text me when you're back," her sister always said. Lena always did. On Fridays, she stopped at Casey's for a cheap slice and a cola, then picked up a paperback from the used bookshelf. She read detective stories but skipped the gory pages. She liked the parts where small details mattered: the receipt, the footprint, the missing screw. "People think the big moments solve cases," she once told her sister. "I think it's the little ones." She said it with a smile, not knowing how many people would later read her own little moments trying to understand the big one. Lena wasn't flashy, but she had a way of making space feel lighter. She remembered birthdays and exact coffee orders. She kept spare gloves in her trunk, in case someone forgets theirs, and she was the first to organize a meal train if a neighbor got sick. In a town where people measured you by whether you showed up, she always showed up. Her family was small and close. Carol, her mom, taught 3rd grade and knew every kid's nickname. Ruth, her sister, was 2 years younger and louder, the kind of person who laughed with her whole face. Their dad had passed when Lena was in high school, and the loss made the 3 of them into a tighter knot. Holidays were simple. Roasted chicken, card games, a movie no one finished because they talked through it. When the power went out, they played Name 6 Things You Can't See But Know Are There. Air, love, gravity, God, home, each other. Lena didn't post much online. This was 2002, but she kept a paper planner with tidy boxes and small checkmarks. On the week she disappeared, the boxes were normal. MON, oil change. TUE, early shift. WED, drop nephew at 8:10. THU, call Aunt May. FRI, mom's porch light bulb. It was the kind of note you write when you expect a week to behave like a week. People who knew her remember small scenes. The red flashlight clicked. The denim jacket hung on the back of a chair. A half-finished crossword with only the three-letter words filled in. None of it screams headline. All of it says person. There is one habit that matters more than the rest. When Lena fueled up at night, she always sent the same text. Gas. Home in 10. It was a simple system. No long messages. No calls while driving. Just a timestamp that told her family the road part was almost over. Her sister saved dozens of those little pings across the months. They were boring, and that was the point. Boring meant safe. On the night this story begins, the routine looked the same. A stop for gas, a short drive left, and a porch light waiting. The denim jacket, the red flashlight, the tidy boxes in the planners stacked like bricks. And then, for the first time anyone could remember, the text didn't come. The evening of November 16, 2002, began in the most ordinary way. Lena had worked a short shift that morning at the distribution center. She clocked out by early afternoon, swung by her sister's house to drop off a bag of hand-me-down clothes for her nephew, and promised she'd be back in the morning for pancakes. It was a Saturday, and friends had invited her out for a quiet get-together. Nothing big, just a few drinks at a local tavern on the edge of town. She almost didn't go. She wasn't a late-night person, but her sister convinced her. One night out won't hurt, Ruth said. So Lena changed into dark jeans, her well-worn denim jacket, and boots that clicked softly on the driveway pavement. She drove her silver sedan, a Pontiac that everyone in town recognized. It wasn't flashy but reliable. That night would be its last drive. At the tavern, the group celebrated a friend's new job. A few beers, jukebox music, and talk about how fast the year was going. Lena nursed a single drink. She wasn't much for alcohol and excused herself before midnight. Witnesses said she was polite, cheerful, and clear-headed. Around 11:45 p.m., she hugged her friends goodbye, pulled the denim jacket close against the cold, and headed to the parking lot. The weather was unforgiving. Indiana in late November meant icy wind and the start of snow. The county roads were slick, patches of black ice hidden in the curves. Local reports described flurries and a temperature just below freezing. It was the kind of night when you held the steering wheel tighter and hoped deer stayed off the shoulders. From the tavern, Lena's route was simple. 5 miles east, then south on County Road 47, a 2-lane road leading toward her house. It was the same path she drove hundreds of times. On the way, she pulled into a Marathon gas station at the edge of town. The station's grainy security footage, later studied for hours, showed her stepping out at 12:03 a.m. She wore her denim jacket, fumbling briefly with the fuel cap before sliding the nozzle in. She looked tired but steady, stamping her feet against the cold pavement. The timestamp ticked forward as she replaced the nozzle, closed the cap, and slipped back into the driver's seat. Her headlights cut across the lot as the Pontiac rolled away. That short clip would become the last confirmed sighting of Lena alive. The road south from the station was empty. It wound through bare trees and low hills, a place more familiar to deer than drivers. Farmhouses sat back from the road, lights mostly off. No one reported hearing a crash. No one reported seeing her car again. But the camera at the station caught something else. A detail so ordinary that night that no one cared. A set of headlights, faint and quick, sliding across the corner of the frame just after Lena's Pontiac disappeared down the road. In 2002, the footage was too blurry to mean much. Investigators logged it as unknown passing vehicle. They had no tools to sharpen or trace it. The tape was boxed, filed, and forgotten. For Lena's family, the night unraveled quickly. By 7 a.m., her mom Carol was dialing her phone, straight to voicemail. Ruth checked too. No reply. By noon, panic replaced patience. They drove Lena's route themselves, scanning ditches and tree lines. Nothing. No skid marks. No glass. No bent guardrail. It was as if the car had been erased. Deputies joined the search later that afternoon. They checked hospitals, called friends, drove the same stretches with lights flashing. Still nothing. The last solid evidence remained the gas station clip, the denim jacket, the Pontiac headlights, and that faint trace of another vehicle behind her. The weather didn't help. Snow fell heavier by the evening, covering any signs that might have been on the shoulder. What was missed that night would stay missed until technology caught up years later. The ordinary car in the frame, the faint pair of headlights no one thought twice about, would later become the key. But in 2002, it was just static in the background of a case that already felt empty. For Lena's family, that silence was unbearable. Their daughter had done what she always did: work, say goodbye, stop for gas, promise to come home. Only this time, the habit that defined her, the little text, gas, home in 10, never arrived. The open road had swallowed her, and all anyone could ask was the question her mother whispered to deputies that first night. If it was just a drive home, where did she go? Sunday mornings in Lena's family usually started the same way. Her mother, Carol, brewed coffee before church. Her sister Ruth would call to double-check breakfast plans, and Lena would text a short line, "On my way." That morning, November 17, 2002, the silence was immediate. At 7 a.m., Carol dialed Lena's phone, straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. By the third call, worry began to rise. Lena wasn't careless with communication. She was steady, almost predictable. Ruth noticed too. She had expected a late-night text, "Gas home in 10." The message never came. At first, she assumed maybe Lena had fallen asleep, phone on the nightstand, but by mid-morning, unease settled in. Ruth drove past Lena's small rental house, knocked on the door, and peered through the blinds. The car wasn't in the driveway. Inside, the lights were off. No answer. By 11 a.m., the family began calling everyone who might have seen her. Friends from the tavern confirmed she had left around 11:45, clear-headed, heading home. None of them had driven her. She said she'd be fine. One friend recalled later, guilt in their voice. Ruth's calls spread wider. Co-workers, neighbors, even the local hospital. No one had seen her. No one had admitted her. The Pontiac, such a familiar sight, was nowhere. By 1 p.m., Carol's panic was visible. She clutched a framed photo of Lena and her nephew, her hands trembling. She told Ruth she would never just disappear. Something's wrong. The family decided to retrace her route themselves. Ruth drove slowly along the 5-mile stretch from the tavern to the county road turnoff, scanning ditches and tree lines. Carol followed in her own car. They stopped at shoulders, walked the edges, called her name into the icy wind. No skid marks. No broken fence posts. No glass glittering on the asphalt. The road looked untouched. By late afternoon, they contacted the county sheriff's office. A deputy arrived at Carol's house with a notepad and a calm voice. He asked for a description: age, height, last clothing, car details. Ruth mentioned the denim jacket. Carol repeated that Lena drove a silver Pontiac, license number carefully written down. The deputy nodded, reassured them it could still be something simple. Maybe she stayed with a friend. Maybe the car broke down somewhere with no cell service. Still, he admitted one detail that troubled him. If it was just an accident, we'd usually see signs by now. Tire marks, a guardrail, something. That single remark stuck with the family. Because he was right, there was no trace. That night, deputies began a routine canvass. They checked along county roads, shined spotlights across fields, and stopped by the Marathon gas station. The clerk remembered her. Quiet, polite, buying only gas. Beyond that, nothing. Back at the Harper home, the phone rang constantly. Neighbors asked if there was news. Friends offered to drive routes again. Ruth sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper, jotting down who she'd call, what they said, what time. It looked like a puzzle with no pieces. By evening, panic had taken full hold. Carol stood at the window, porch light glowing, as if Lena might still pull up the drive. Ruth tried calling the phone one more time, whispering to herself, "Pick up, just once." Only silence answered. The deputy returned briefly, updating them that no car had been found in ditches, no accidents reported. He promised patrols would continue overnight. He wrote "missing person, active search" on the file. For the Harper family, Those words were both a lifeline and a knife. Active search meant people were looking. Missing person meant she was gone. That first night closed with a feeling that never left them. If this was just a simple accident, why was there no trace at all? The first official search began the same night Lena was reported missing. Deputies drove her route with floodlights sweeping across the shoulders. They slowed at every curve, checked the ditches, and walked the icy grass. Still nothing. The road looked untouched, as if no car had passed at all. By the next morning, the search widened. Volunteers from town joined in, friends, co-workers, even people who barely knew her. They formed small groups, scanning fields and creek beds with flashlights. Posters went up quickly. Lena's photo, her car description, and the words "missing" ANY information call. The flyers were taped to utility poles, pinned on church bulletin boards, and posted in grocery store windows. The sheriff's office requested help from the state's Department of Natural Resources. Divers were sent into nearby lakes and ponds, focusing on spots where cars had skidded off in past winters. But it was 2002, and the sonar equipment available then was limited. Grainy images showed vague shapes, logs, old debris, rusted machinery, but nothing that matched a Pontiac. Each dive ended the same. Divers surfacing, shaking their heads. Phone tracking wasn't an option either. Cell towers existed, but data retention was poor and tools for mapping pings were years away. Investigators asked carriers for help, but the answer was blunt. No usable records. Without tire marks, without witnesses, and without digital traces, the case was already running cold. The absence of answers fueled rumors. At the diner on Main Street, people whispered about her ex-boyfriend. At church, someone muttered about a new man she had recently met. Others leaned toward a simple accident theory. She slid on ice, ended up in water too deep to see. But even that idea hit a wall. If the car had gone into a lake, where were the bubbles, the floating debris, the oil slick? For weeks, deputies checked every lead. Some claimed to have seen headlights near a quarry at midnight. Others swore they saw a Pontiac speeding south. None of it checked out. Each sighting collapsed under scrutiny. By December, the posters had faded in the weather. Some were replaced. Some tore loose and blew across the snow. Volunteers thinned out. The search shifted from urgent to routine, and then from routine to dormant. The Harper family never stopped asking questions, but the official file grew thin. Inside that file was a small note that nobody paid much attention to at the time. During one of the early canvasses, an officer had written down, "Paint trace on guardrail, faint red." The color didn't match Lena's silver Pontiac, and no car was reported damaged. The note sat on page 12, tucked between witness statements. No lab test was ordered. No follow-up was done. That single overlooked line would sit untouched for years. Only later, when technology advanced and eyes went back to the file, would that red mark stop being ordinary and start being the key. When weeks passed without Lena or her car, the search for answers shifted from fields and lakes to conversations in diners, church basements, and grocery store aisles. The vacuum of facts was quickly filled with theories. The first centered on her ex-boyfriend. They had broken up the year before, and like many small-town splits, people remembered the arguments more than the quiet days. Some whispered he still carried a grudge. Others insisted he'd been seen driving past her house late at night. Deputies questioned him early, but his alibi, working an overnight shift, checked out. Time cards confirmed it. No evidence tied him to Lena's disappearance. Another theory suggested Lena had chosen to leave voluntarily. Maybe the pressure of work, family obligations, and small-town eyes became too much. People asked, what if she just drove away to start fresh? But to those who knew her best, that idea was impossible. She was close with her mother and sister. She never once hinted at running away. And perhaps most importantly, she adored her nephew. She wouldn't just vanish on him, Carol said firmly. The theory had drama, but no foundation. A darker theory painted the night as a stranger abduction. The tavern sat near a highway exit, and some believed someone passing through could have followed her. The gas station footage showed no confrontation, no stranger approaching. Beyond the faint headlights behind her, there was nothing unusual. Without evidence of foul play at the scene, the abduction idea was speculation and nothing more. Others clung to the accident explanation. Lena might have slid off a slick road and into water the divers hadn't reached. This theory had weight. Indiana winters were harsh, but the repeated searches turned up no Pontiac, no broken guardrails, no signs of impact. The absence of debris argued against it. Each theory had its circle of believers, but every one of them ended in the same place. No proof. The ex had an alibi. The voluntary disappearance clashed with her habits. The abduction had no evidence. The accident had no scene. By early 2003, the sheriff's office listed 3 possibilities in the file: accident, voluntary disappearance, or foul play. But none could be proven. For the Harper family, the rumors added a cruel layer to their grief. Each suggestion felt like a judgment, as though strangers were rewriting Lena's story with no facts to back it up. One thing became clear as time passed. The theories didn't fit the evidence, or the lack of it. The truth was still out there, buried under silence. And one small detail, buried in that same file, the faint red paint mark noted and forgotten, was waiting to break the cycle of guesses. After the first winter passed with no answers, the case slipped into a new phase, the waiting. The Harper family marked the weeks with phone calls to the sheriff's office, each one shorter than the last. Deputies had nothing new to report. "We're still checking," became the routine line. The community's urgency began to fade. Flyers curled at the edges, sun bleached on utility poles. Grocery stores replaced missing posters with ads for sales. Local newspapers covered new headlines. Lena's name appeared less often, mentioned only in quiet conversations. But for the Harpers, time never moved the same way. Every November 16th, they gathered at Carol's small house. Candles were lit in the window. A chair was left open at the dinner table. Ruth prayed out loud, asking for strength. Carol prayed silently, clutching Lena's denim jacket. Each year they repeated the ritual, as if their devotion could pull her home. Small vigils were held downtown. Neighbors brought flowers, strangers brought candles, and the family spoke briefly to small crowds that thinned each year. "We won't stop looking," Ruth told anyone who would listen. "We'll never stop." In the early years, reporters visited. Local TV crews filmed the family at the porch light, asking how they were coping. But by the 5th anniversary, the calls slowed. By the 10th, they stopped. For most of the town, the case became a memory. For the family, it stayed present, raw and sharp. Carol never stopped phoning the sheriff's office. Even when the case was officially labeled cold, she called once a month. "Any updates? Any chance someone looked again?" Deputies answered politely, but there was rarely movement. Meanwhile, Ruth kept copies of the original case file notes, printed articles, and every flyer in a large binder. "Someday someone will want this," she said. Her nephew grew older with the binder always in sight, a reminder that his aunt had never come home. Years stacked into nearly 2 decades. The road where she vanished was repaved. The tavern where she was last seen changed ownership. The gas station switched to digital cameras, replacing the old VHS that once captured her final moments. Life changed. But for the Harpers, the loss stayed frozen in 2002. Then, in early 2021, a new name appeared in the local news. A county prosecutor, just sworn in, announced plans to review long unsolved files. He called them unfinished promises. And buried in the stack of old cases was Lena's. After years of silence, someone in authority was finally saying out loud what the Harpers had whispered every night. "This case isn't over." When prosecutor Daniel Hayes took office in 2021, he made a promise during his first press conference. "No family should wait decades for answers if modern tools can help us." He announced a cold case review unit, small at first but determined. Among the oldest files handed to him was Lena's disappearance from 2002. The file was thin compared to modern standards: typed reports, hand-drawn maps, black and white photos, and a VHS tape labeled Marathon Station. November 2002, Hayes noticed one line scribbled in an early search report: "Trace red paint on guardrail." No lab follow-up, no explanation, just a note. That detail lingered in his mind. Hayes called a meeting with the sheriff's office and state investigators. "We're not looking for guesses," he told them. "We're looking for answers. Let's use every tool 2002 didn't have." A task force was formed: local deputies, state detectives, forensic scientists, and volunteer divers from a nonprofit search and recovery group. Their mission was simple on paper: find the car, confirm the truth, and close the case with evidence. Modern tools versus 2002 limits. The first limitation to fix was the water search. Back in 2002, divers used standard equipment, guided by hunches and vague sonar screens. The images were blurry, often confused by logs or rocks. Now, the task force brought side-scan sonar, a tool that creates crisp images of the lake and riverbed, almost like black and white photographs. Next was Lena's phone. In 2002, carriers couldn't map movements with precision, and records were discarded quickly. But archived data still existed, stored in raw form. A digital forensics team rebuilt it. Each cell tower ping from the night she vanished was plotted on modern software. It showed her phone leaving the tavern, stopping at the gas station, then traveling south, exactly as her family always believed. The real shock came when analysts noticed another number. A second phone pinged towers at the same time, same route. In 2002, the overlap was invisible. In 2021, it was undeniable. Then came the CCTV enhancement. The marathon tape was digitized and processed through software that sharpened frames and boosted contrast. For years, all anyone saw was Lena at the pump, then her car driving away. But when the enhanced footage was slowed, a faint image appeared at the edge of the frame. A vehicle passing behind her. Not just headlights, an outline, a silhouette. Investigators noted the boxy shape, the height of the lights. It wasn't a compact car. It looked more like a pickup truck. Finally, forensic specialists reopened the box of physical evidence. Among the items was the paint scrap from the guardrail. Technology in 2002 couldn't do much with it. In 2021, lab analysis identified it as automotive paint, Victory Red, a color used on early 2000s Chevrolet trucks. That was the first hard clue linking the unknown vehicle to a specific type. The search begins again. In spring of 2022, boats fitted with side-scan sonar swept across local lakes and quarries. Volunteers worked in grids, scanning every square yard. Hours of images filled computer monitors, submerged logs, rusted farm equipment, sunken boats. Most were ordinary. But one afternoon, a shape appeared that didn't fit the usual pattern. The sonar image showed sharp angles, a roofline, and four corners, dimensions too precise for a natural object. One diver muttered, "That's not a log." Coordinates were marked. The task force didn't announce the find publicly. They needed confirmation. Remote cameras were lowered into the water, their lights cutting through silt and murk. The screen flickered with debris, then slowly revealed a shadowed surface, metallic, smooth, and curved. As the ROV panned, a familiar contour emerged. A car roof. The divers surfaced to report what they had seen. No license plate was visible yet, but the size matched a sedan. For the first time in nearly 20 years, the team had a credible location, connecting the pieces. Meanwhile, analysts mapped the cell tower pings. Lena's phone was last active near that same lake. The second phone, the one traveling the same route, also went dark in the same area, then reappeared in town nearly an hour later. It looked less like coincidence, more like parallel movement. Investigators cross-checked the second number. It belonged to a man who had lived in the county for decades, a familiar face in town. He wasn't a stranger at all. Back at the lab, the enhanced CCTV was compared to vehicle records. The outline, the headlight pattern, and the red paint scrap all pointed toward one make and model, a Chevy Silverado pickup. Records showed only a handful of red Silverados registered locally in 2002, and one of them belonged to the same man whose phone pinged alongside Lena's. The picture was forming. But prosecutors knew pictures weren't enough. They needed physical proof. They needed the car out of the water. The weight of waiting. For the Harper family, the renewed investigation was both hopeful and painful. Carol, now older, still kept the porch light burning. Ruth attended every briefing she was allowed to sit in. "We don't need theories anymore," she told Hayes. "We just need the truth." The task force continued scanning, confirming, double-checking. The lake held secrets, but sonar made it harder for them to stay hidden. And in the middle of one long night in the command trailer, Hayes stood over the maps and whispered the words everyone had been waiting to hear. This isn't just an accident. Someone was with her that night. The morning of the recovery was gray and still. The lake's surface looked like glass, but everyone at the shoreline knew something heavy was waiting beneath. The sonar images had already told part of the story, a box-shaped outline, roughly the size of a sedan, half buried in silt. Now it was time to see if it really was Lena's car. The task force launched a small boat fitted with an ROV camera, a yellow submersible on a long cable. Its lights cut down through the water, catching suspended particles that shimmered like snow. On the screen inside the command trailer, the lakebed came into view. Tree branches, a rusted barrel, shifting clouds of mud. Then the camera tilted, and everyone in the room froze. A curved roofline appeared. The camera panned slowly across a side panel coated in algae. A wheel, half sunk in the mud, was visible. The size, the shape, the lines, it was a car. And as the camera zoomed in, faint letters on the trunk came into focus. The Pontiac emblem. Technicians compared the dimensions with records. The match was exact, but there was one more step, confirmation beyond any doubt. The ROV glided forward until its lens rested on a metal plate hidden behind debris. The numbers were faint, but when enhanced on screen, the VIN was legible. The digits matched Lena's silver Pontiac Grand Am. After almost 2 decades, the car that had vanished into silence was finally found. The recovery itself was slow, meticulous. A salvage crane extended its cables, divers secured harnesses around the frame, and with a low groan of steel, the vehicle began to rise. Water churned. Mud swirled upward. Then, after minutes that felt like hours, the roof broke the surface. The Pontiac emerged, dripping and rust-stained, the silver paint dulled but still recognizable. On the shore, Carol and Ruth clutched each other, tears streaming. For them, the moment was both unbearable and necessary. Relief that Lena's car had been found. Grief that it had been there all along, hidden underwater while they kept waiting by the phone. Reporters who had gathered fell silent as the crane lowered the car onto a platform. Forensic tents went up immediately. Investigators in protective suits moved quickly, documenting every angle before opening the doors. Inside, they found personal items still intact. Lena's old handbag on the passenger seat, a cracked Nokia phone, coins scattered in the cup holder, and a paper bag swollen from years of water. These small things confirmed what the family already knew. Lena hadn't left her life willingly. She had been on her way home, but the car held more than memories. It carried evidence. On the rear bumper, investigators spotted a streak of red paint, still visible despite years underwater. Samples were taken. Lab tests confirmed it wasn't Pontiac silver. It was Victory red, a factory color used on Chevrolet trucks. Underneath the car, divers recovered a frayed steel cable tangled in the suspension. The marks suggested the vehicle had been hooked or dragged before sinking. Investigators also noted long parallel scratches across the undercarriage, consistent with being pulled along a hard surface. These weren't the signs of a driver losing control on ice. They were the marks of a deliberate act. Someone had forced this car into the water. When Hayes, the prosecutor, reviewed the evidence, he spoke quietly but firmly. This was never just an accident. For the Harpers, the discovery closed one set of questions and opened another. The cruelest rumor, that Lena had chosen to leave, was gone forever. She hadn't abandoned her family. She hadn't disappeared by choice. The items inside her car proved she was living her normal life until someone stopped her. Ruth wept when she saw her sister's handbag, its fabric stiff with silt. Carol, now frail but unshaken, whispered. She was on her way home. I knew it. For investigators, the Pontiac was no longer just a missing vehicle. It was a crime scene preserved in mud. The red paint scrap, the drag marks, the cable fragment all pointed to foul play. And when compared with the enhanced CCTV and cell phone data, a picture was beginning to emerge. A second car, a shadow in the frame, a phone that traveled the same road, a red truck registered to a man the community thought they knew. The Pontiac had risen from the lake carrying truth in its rusted frame. Truth that proved Lena's disappearance wasn't chance, wasn't weather, and wasn't her choice. It was something darker. With the Pontiac finally out of the water, The task force pieced the night together again, this time using tools that didn't exist in 2002. What once looked like a mystery started to look like a timeline. The digital trail. The digital forensics team mapped Lena's phone data. A simple flip phone in 2002 left behind a trail of cell tower pings, silent signals stored by the carrier. Reconstructed on modern software, the dots told a story. 11:47 p.m., leaving the tavern. 12:03 a.m., ping near the Marathon gas station. 12:07 a.m., moving south along County Road 47. 12:13 a.m., last signal near the lake. Then, nothing. But Lena's wasn't the only phone moving that night. Another device, registered to Mark Clay, a longtime county resident and volunteer firefighter, pinged along the same route at the same times. In 2002, those overlapping signals looked like coincidence. In 2022, laid over the map, the parallel movement was unmistakable. Two phones traveled the same road. One vanished at the water. The other returned to town. The video frame. Investigators turned again to the Marathon gas station footage. The enhanced frame showed Lena fueling her car, pulling away, headlights cutting across the lot. Seconds later, another vehicle passed in the background. When cleaned and slowed, details emerged. The higher beam angle, the boxy outline, the spacing of the taillights. Forensic video analysts compared it to vehicle specs. Their conclusion: a Chevy Silverado pickup, early 2000s model, red in color. Vehicle records from that year listed only a handful of such trucks in the county. One of them was registered to Mark Clay. Forensics in the mud. The Pontiac itself carried evidence too. The red paint transfer on its rear bumper was tested against archival samples from Chevrolet. The lab confirmed it matched Victory Red, a shade used on Silverados sold between 1999 and 2003. Technicians also found fibers lodged in the trunk lining of the Pontiac that didn't belong to it. Under microscopy, the weave and dye matched carpeting from a Silverado truck bed, and the cable fragment pulled from the undercarriage, corroded but intact, was consistent with the type of winch cable often installed on pickup trucks. Investigators later discovered that Clay had owned such a winch in 2002, though it was conveniently lost years later. The three findings, paint, fibers, cable, formed a physical triangle. Together, they tied Lena's car to another vehicle, one that didn't belong on her road that night but was proven to be there. Old voices, new weight. With this fresh evidence, investigators re-interviewed witnesses from 2002. Some memories had faded, but others were sharper than expected. At the tavern, a bartender recalled Lena speaking briefly with Clay near the counter that night. It wasn't friendly. She told him, "Stop following me." The bartender remembered. Back then, he didn't think it mattered. Now, paired with the cell data, it was damning. Another voice came from a woman named Gloria Sanders, who lived near the old quarry road south of town. She had once mentioned hearing a truck engine and a metallic crash around 1 a.m. on the night Lena vanished. Snow had fallen heavy, and she doubted herself. She never pressed the memory. In 2022, when shown the timeline, she swore it was real. "I thought it was kids messing around," she said. But it was louder, like a winch pulling. Her account lined up with the 40-minute window when Clay's phone stopped near the lake before heading back to town. Building the chain, Prosecutor Hayes laid the evidence out on a board in the task force conference room. Digital trail, two phones, same path, same time. CCTV, a red pickup trailing Lena's Pontiac. Forensics, red paint transfer, Silverado fibers, cable fragment. Witnesses, argument at the bar, truck noises near the quarry. Each piece connected to the next. It no longer looked like speculation. It looked like a chain. Investigators concluded that Clay had followed Lena from the tavern, waited as she fueled up, then intercepted her on the county road. The cable suggested he dragged or pushed her car into the lake, leaving it hidden for nearly 20 years. The human cost. For the Harpers, the updates were both vindication and agony. Ruth sat in the briefing room, staring at the board. "All this time," she whispered. Carol held her hand, tears in her eyes. "She didn't leave us," she said softly. "Someone took her from us." Hayes reassured them that evidence, not rumors, was finally telling the story. But he also knew the next step was delicate, because if every sign pointed to Mark Clay, The question wasn't whether he was guilty in the eyes of investigators. It was how to arrest a man the community still saw as a volunteer, a firefighter, a neighbor. The task force debated for days about how to handle the arrest. They wanted it controlled, public enough to show accountability, but safe. Mark Clay was still an active volunteer firefighter, often seen at the station or helping at community events. Hayes, the prosecutor, made the final call. "We take him where everyone can see. This town needs to know the truth didn't hide forever." It was a Sunday morning in March 2022 when deputies moved in. The First Baptist Church bells had just started ringing. Families gathered on the steps, greeting one another, kids chasing each other across the grass. Mark arrived in his red Silverado, the same model now tied to Lena's disappearance. He stepped out wearing his uniform shirt, radio clipped to his belt, ready to attend service like always. Then the sirens cut through the quiet. 3 patrol cars swung into the lot, lights flashing. Officers stepped out quickly, voices firm but steady. "Mark Clay, you are under arrest. Hands where we can see them." The congregation froze. Mothers pulled children close. Men who had served on committees with Mark stared in disbelief. Some thought it must be a mistake, surely not the man who read scripture, who helped put out barn fires, who organized food drives. But when officers turned him around and the cuffs clicked into place, reality sank in. Mark shook his head, his voice almost casual. "This is wrong. You all know me." But the deputies didn't flinch. They led him past stunned faces, past neighbors who once trusted him completely. News spread fast. Phones buzzed. Within minutes, local outlets broke the story. Volunteer firefighter arrested in 2002 disappearance. At home, Carol and Ruth watched the coverage through tears. For 20 years, they had lived with whispers that Lena might have left, that maybe she'd crashed alone. Now the images showed the truth. Her case was never about her choices. It was about someone else's actions. Ruth cried openly, shaking her head. "He stood in church next to us all these years." Carol, voice quiet, answered, "That's how he hit. He blended in." The town's reaction turned quickly from shock to anger. At the diner, people slammed coffee cups on the counter, furious they had shared tables with him. At the fire station, colleagues felt betrayed, remembering how he once comforted families after accidents, while hiding his own crime. Hayes addressed reporters that afternoon. For nearly 2 decades, this community trusted a man who did not deserve that trust. Evidence now proves Lena Harper did not vanish by choice and did not die in an accident. She was the victim of foul play. The man you saw taken into custody today is responsible. The open question, the one people asked again and again, was how Clay managed to walk free for so long. Investigators explained simply. In 2002, there wasn't enough. The cell data couldn't be mapped. The CCTV was too blurry. The paint trace couldn't be matched. Without the car, there was no scene. Technology had caught up. And when the Pontiac rose from the lake, it carried with it the proof that had been missing all those years. The courthouse was packed on the morning of Mark Clay's first appearance. Reporters lined the hallway, cameras flashing as deputies led him in wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of the firefighter's uniform the town was used to. Inside, benches were full, neighbors, church members, and strangers who had followed the case for years. Judge Whitmore called the room to order. The charge was read aloud in plain language. First-degree murder in connection with the disappearance of Lena Harper in 2002. The prosecutor, Daniel Hayes, laid out the probable cause in terms everyone could understand. "This case sat unsolved for nearly 20 years because we lacked the tools," he began. "But evidence never disappears. It waits for technology to catch up. That's what happened here." Hayes walked through the chain, digital trail, 2 phones moving together. Lena's and Clay's, on the same route at the same times. Hers stopped at the lake. His return to town. CCTV, enhanced footage showing a red pickup trailing Lena's Pontiac. Forensics, red paint transfer on the bumper, fibers from a Silverado bed, and a winch cable fragment lodged in the car's undercarriage. Witnesses, a bartender recalling an argument between Lena and Clay the night she vanished. A neighbor hearing a truck engine and winch noises near the quarry. "This is no accident," Hayes concluded. "This is deliberate. The victim didn't choose to leave. She didn't lose control on ice. She was forced off the road and her car was hidden. And the man responsible is sitting right here. Clay's defense attorney rose quickly. His argument was less about evidence, more about character. Mark Clay is a man of service, he told the court. For 20 years, he has fought fires, read scripture, and supported this community. Are we to believe that a respected firefighter and church member lived among you as a killer all this time? Reputation matters. Image matters. This is not who he is. The defense also pointed out potential gaps. Could the paint transfer have come from a minor bump on another day? Could the cell data simply show coincidence? Suspicion is not proof, the attorney pressed. We must not let the shock of new technology replace the standard of reasonable doubt. The judge listened carefully, reviewing the written affidavit in front of her. When she finally spoke, the room held its breath. The evidence presented here forms a clear and reasonable chain of probable cause, she said firmly. It is enough to proceed with trial. Given the seriousness of the charge and the risk of flight, bail is denied. The gavel struck once. Carol and Ruth clutched each other's hands in quiet relief. It wasn't closure, but it was movement, something they hadn't seen in 2 decades. Around them, townspeople sat in uneasy silence, wrestling with the image of the man they thought they knew against the evidence laid out before them. As Clay was led back out in cuffs, one open question lingered in the air. What would a jury believe when this case finally went to trial? The lake that once kept its silence became the site of a vigil. On a calm evening, neighbors, friends, and strangers gathered at the water's edge. The shoreline was lined with candles flickering against the dusk, their reflections trembling on the surface. Bouquets of white lilies and roses rested on the rocks, while paper lanterns drifted upward, carrying messages written in careful hands. We remember you. You're home now. Carol stood at the center, holding a framed photo of Lena in her denim jacket. Her voice was steady but soft. For 20 years, I prayed for this day. I prayed for answers, not just for myself, but for everyone who wondered. We found the truth. That doesn't end the pain, but it ends the silence. Ruth spoke next. She thanked the search volunteers, the investigators who never stopped, and the prosecutor who reopened the case. Her words cut through the quiet. For all the people who said she might have left on her own, this proves she didn't. She wanted to come home, and she tried. Someone else made sure she couldn't. The vigil wasn't only about grief. It became a lesson for the town, one everyone could feel in the stillness. Technology had done what 2002 could not. Side-scan sonar revealed the car that lay just out of reach. Enhanced CCTV showed the shadow that once looked like nothing. Cell tower maps proved 2 phones traveled together. The ignored red paint note finally made sense when tested with modern labs. What once felt like dead ends became connections. Persistence mattered too. The case had been labeled cold, but the family's candles, phone calls, and vigils kept it alive. Without them, Lena's file might have stayed in a drawer forever. The community learned practical lessons. Share your route. Send the text. Pay attention to odd details. A truck that lingers, a noise in the night. Small things matter. They might not seem important until years later when they complete the puzzle. And there was one more truth. Why Mark Clay blended in for so long. He wasn't a stranger in the shadows. He was at the church pulpit, at the fire station, waving in parades. That's how he avoided suspicion. Familiarity became his cover. As the last lanterns rose into the sky, the Harpers closed their part of the vigil with a quiet promise. Carol whispered, "We will carry her memory forward, not just her loss." The lake was calm again, but different now. It no longer hid a secret. It held a reminder that truth can be buried, but not erased. Water hides, but it never forgets. It kept the Pontiac out of sight for years, but it could not erase the truth written in paint, cable, and quiet data points. In the end, technology didn't create a story. It revealed the one that was always there. If you've watched this far, you've seen how small things mattered. A faint red paint note from 2002, a blurry headlight silhouette on a VHS tape, a handful of cell pings that finally lined up. None of these clues felt big on their own. Together, they changed everything. Tell us in the comments, which clue changed your view of the case? Was it the sonar image that didn't look like a log? The enhanced frame showing a truck behind Lena? The cell phones traveling side by side? or the cable scars under the car that prove this wasn't an accident. We also want to know where you're watching from. Your comments help other viewers find these stories, and they help families see that people still care. If you value complete, calm, evidence-led storytelling, subscribe. We make long-form cases without filler, simple English, clear steps, real closure where it's possible, and honesty when it isn't. Tap the bell if you want to know when the next case drops. Before we go, 3 takeaways to carry with you. Small clues matter. Write them down. If something feels off, a tailing car, a late text, a noise near water, tell someone. Tools change outcomes. Sonar, enhanced video, and rebuilt phone maps turned a dead end into a path. Support the teams that use them. Community is part of the solution. A call, a photo, a memory, your detail might be the missing piece years from now. To Lena's family, thank you for letting us tell her story with respect. To everyone who searched, sent tips, and showed up at the water's edge, you proved that patience is not the same as giving up. Next, we're looking at another cold case with a different kind of silence. No car, no lake, just a handwritten note found years later that points to the last person seen with the victim. The timeline looks clean until one timestamp refuses to fit. If you're curious how 1 minute can break an alibi, you won't want to miss it. Water hides, but it never forgets. Neither should we. If this case moved you, like the video so more people see it, comment with the clue that stood out. Subscribe if you want more cases told with care, facts, and patience. We'll see you in the next one.